Mira Business FM, where business comes to talk.
This is Mira Business FM, and it's the importance of branding next. And my guest is a partner marketing director at Dell Technologies for the CEMETA region, which is Central Eastern Europe, the Middle East, Turkey, and Africa. Ben McDonald, that is a geography and a half.
It's a lot of countries.
I was going to say a lot of travelling.
Very diverse. Yes, there is a lot of traveling, but it's really very interesting. It's an interesting role, dealing with lots of different cultures, and it keeps me on my toes.
I can well imagine. So, well, let's start at the beginning. I want to kind of talk to you this morning about branding almost generically in a lot of ways, because, and I said this to you off air a few moments ago, I was always a person, I didn't really understand branding, marketing, personal branding, and I kind of was a bit, I don't think that's a real thing. And I've learned since that I was a complete idiot in that way, because it's a very important part of our lives. Broadly, when we say branding, what do we mean? How do you define the term?
Well, when you look at a brand, people might look at certain things like even a particular color. We have quite a lot of interns come to Dell Technologies, and I talk to them about marketing and branding. And I have one slide in my presentation which has two colors on it, and it has red and it has blue. And then I ask the audience, tell me the two brands. And some people say, oh, it's Manchester United, or maybe it's Vodacom. But most people quite quickly say Coca-Cola. I'm like, okay, well, if the red is Coca-Cola, then what's the blue? Then the blue is Pepsi. And then that sort of starts me in my conversation about how powerful branding can be, that if you can literally just show a color, and most people would represent, I'm looking right in front of me now, that red color, most people would represent or think about a particular brand based on just a color, then that's how powerful a brand can actually be. So a brand is a combination of, it can be colors, it can be logos, all the logos that we know and love, taglines. Let's think about Nike. What's Nike? Just do it. Okay, right. And it's one of the most recognizable brands in the world. Certain colors. The company I work for, we sort of standardize on sort of a blue type color. Okay, and if you look at things like neuromarketing and you look at how the brain reacts to colors and numbers, there's a lot of science behind it. But so branding is a combination of all sorts of different things. But I think more and more nowadays, branding is also about what a company does versus what they say they are. So if they say they're this, they're that, they're the most ethical, they're this, but if what they do in practice is different, and that's what I know we're going to talk about authenticity in a little bit, as well. So branding can mean, a lot of different things, and there's a lot of different elements to what is a brand. And when you design a brand, my wife is a designer actually, and she designs logos, and she really sort of thinks about what people look at when they're looking at a brand. But it's certainly more than just the visual that you see on paper nowadays. A lot more to it. And different generations, and I'm sure you've had speakers before talking about all the different generations, X and boomers and Zs and alphas. And, we think differently about work, about brands. And it's quite tricky in marketing to market to all of these different. So when you're working for a corporate or even a small company, when you're thinking about branding and how you appeal to your audience, it's actually a lot to think about.
Well, there is, and that's exactly what's going through my head. There's a minefield. Well, but let's look at branding in business. I want to talk to you about personal branding as well.
Yes.
That's a really interesting topic, but we'll come to that. First point I wanted to put to you is business is about trust, I think, almost before anything. In a product, in an offering, in paying on time, in treating customers, clients, employees with respect. Everything counts. Is that where you start when it comes to creating or thinking about a brand? Trust?
Well, I think, first of all, trust, as just a key foundation of being a human being now, trust is, important. And I think what you've seen, and there's been many surveys on this over the years, is that our perceptions of trust have just been declining. Our trust of people, our trust of brands. And when you look at the bigger subject of being authentic and authenticity, trust is right there. Absolutely. You know, I think what happens nowadays, and we'll talk a little bit about personal branding, but certainly as organizations, you can be a hero one day and a zero literally the next the next day.
Yeah.
And consumers can vote with their feet very, very quickly nowadays. And they can bring down brands and celebrities and people very, very quickly. So trust is something that you've got to build over time. You're not, you know, if you're creating a brand tomorrow, you're not immediately going to get trust.
No.
You know, perhaps if it's a sub-brand of a trusted brand already, yeah, maybe there's an element there. But you certainly have to, you know, walk the walk first for a period of time before you start gaining trust. And trust can be taken away so quickly as well. You can be trusted as a person, trusted as a brand, and if you do one step, you know, out of line, it can go horribly wrong. There's actually, if you read Shoe Dog, which is the founder of Nike, there's some interesting stories there about Nike was, you know, obviously doing great at the time, and then there was a lot of investigations about how they were manufacturing their products as well.
Yeah,
and there was a lot of distrust around the brand, so they had to rebuild their brand over the years. And so trust can be removed very, very quickly, but it's super important.
I mean, I'm thinking of that. This is the factories where the shoes were made, for example, or Samsung had that thing with the phone that was not exploding, but could ignite.
Yes.
At one point. Brands, it seems to me, if you face it head on, and the trust is waning, but if you face things head on and you do that with heart, and I'm using all these terms,
Yeah,
but
and
very
openness.
unscientific, and being open about it, you can recover from that. Samsung came out of that the
Yeah.
phone thing
I
incredibly
often,
well.
I often think, and you see this on the news sometimes when there's delays at airports and the airlines are not telling the people that are waiting for flights any information whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I always think if they were just a little bit more open, just to say, look, this is what's going on, people generally understand.
Yeah.
But people don't like it when they're not being told, or obviously if they're being, you know, deceived in some way, shape, or form. So openness, trust, authenticity, we're going to use that word a few times as well. Super important for sure around brands and also people brands as well. And I know we'll talk about that, but people are brands as well.
Okay, so credibility comes from trust in the, you do what you promise. You put your money where your mouth is, as it were. Being authentic. Authenticity is the thing that we all talk about now. We're being our authentic selves. This is really who I am. And I often think when somebody says that, no, it's authentic. And I think, no, it's not really. I'm a cynical soul, probably. But actually, it's really hard, I think, to be yourself, because we're all putting on a front in some way, and that extends from people to brands to you name it. There's always the sheen of what you want to present, but behind that, it's a tough thing to do with real meaning, isn't it?
It is. If you think about that authenticity, and sometimes it feels like it's a bit cheesy when you're talking about these sorts of subjects.
I'm making marks whenever we say authenticity, and I've just crossed
Yeah,
through
it's
the
like
four
bingo.
there.
I think we're going to
It
do
is.
bingo, authenticity bingo. But look, it's something. I think about myself. I think about who I am at work and who I am at home.
Yeah.
And it is two slightly different people. And
That's all of us.
and I think that's absolutely fine. It's absolutely fine. I think as human beings, we can see through people quite easily. So I think when you see someone at work and then perhaps you see them acting, maybe I should use the word a bit fake.
Right.
I think it's very easy for us to spot, and then you don't feel like you have a genuine relationship with some of these people. So I think it is a fine line between being your true self and maybe amping it up a little bit in certain situations, personally, I'm at home, I'm relatively shy. I'm not like the life and the soul of the party, but in my role in marketing, I know I have to stand up on stage and present, and I have to do things like this. And so I have to do things that are maybe a little bit out of my comfort zone, or activities that if my mum was seeing me do this, she would think, wow, I wouldn't have imagined Ben would be, doing a radio interview. So it's a fine line, that's for sure.
That's an interesting point, actually. Your mother would look at you proudly and think, "No, I raised
hope
my
so.
boy well, and he's he's out there doing it." But you're expected to take a lead in the role that you have, aren't you?
Absolutely. Look, I lead a relatively large team across lots of different countries, and that adds an element of pressure. In the role, is that people are looking to you for guidance, they're looking to you for coaching, and you're there to guide the team, and also a lot of the times I'm the face of Dell Technologies as well. So I'm representing the company, and you have to be careful what you say and what you do, but it's a job I find exciting, and I get a lot of value out of it as well.
Okay, so that brings me to the personal brand. I'm holding off that for a minute because I want to come back to that later. But unique brands stand out, and one of the things I think across the board you can probably point to is either their story is slightly different, and the values in that story mean something to people are able to relate to that.
They connect to it.
There is a connection that you make. Or they're very effective at communicating themselves authentically. There we go. Another point on the paper there.
Yeah, I think people make connections with brands over the years for different reasons. It could be the Coke and Pepsi one is quite an interesting one. I used to live in South Africa for 16 years. And at certain stages during the history of South Africa, there were brands that pulled out of the country.
Right.
And if I think about, and this is an interesting discussion I've had with interns at work, the Coke Pepsi. I grew up with Coke because that was the brand that was available to me, and it was the brand that my dad liked. And so I have some sort of emotional connection. And I think as marketing, we're always wanting people to make some sort of emotional connections to our brands of some kind or another. And if you look at neuromarketing, it's quite interesting. If you look at some of the biggest brands in the world, how the brain reacts to some of those brands is on par with religion in some cases. I'm not going to mention the brand, but for people to stand in a queue before a shop opens when a product is just about to be released says something about that particular brand, and also how people have made a connection. And as marketeers, we're always trying to make some sort of emotional connection. I think as human beings, it's our nature to try and make connections with people, and we want to do that as brands. And some people are successful at doing that. Some brands are successful at doing that. And some brands have been doing that for years and years and years, and have a lot of history of making connections with people and understanding how consumers are thinking, how they're going to be thinking in the future. And they're just great at making those connections.
Is it science or is it art?
I think it's a bit of both. When in marketing, certainly now it's a mixture of both science and art.
Right.
We use a lot of science now, a lot of data in what we're doing in marketing around targeting of customers, in looking and trying to predict the ways people are buying, and some of the new technologies that we're seeing today around AI is another interesting topic. We're being more successful now, even trying to predict what people are going to buy in the future, even before they may even know it, looking at their body language, and I'm meaning digital body language here, looking at trends, looking at when they tend to purchase products. And I think a classic example of something like that in predicting behavior is the supermarkets do a great job. Read an article once about they know that when a certain temperature hits, they know they have to stock the shelves with certain products.
Sure.
So there's definitely a science to it for sure, but there is still, which I think is quite nice, there's still a good art to it, as well. So when we're hiring for new marketing managers, when I'm hiring for new marketing managers, always looking for a nice balance between someone who's creative, someone who has the art side of things, but someone who very much understands the science and the data, because it is very much a data-driven world nowadays, and a lot of the decisions that we're making in our daily lives are based on ones and zeros and data.
Well, they all are now. I mean, this is the thing. We live in the technological age, don't we?
Absolutely.
If I can get my words out. So what about the impact of AI on branding? I know it's a topic that it's a hot topic, let's put it that way. But tell me,
well, it's a hot topic in my industry, that's for sure, in the IT industry. It's something that we started hearing about a few years ago. And then we started hearing about the creation of content via AI.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of people that were worried, perhaps the marketing industry, maybe in your industry, anyone who's creating content around, okay, so what happens to the human beings now? Because I can use some of these tools to create, we were talking about this off air, podcasts, videos, social media posts as well.
You were talking about your AI news.
Yeah, listening to AI news on the way here as well. So, sorry, all the DJs that are out there. I wasn't listening to a human being. So, yes, we've seen this sort of infiltrate, I suppose, the world over the last few years.
Yeah.
And I think as a human race, we start to get a bit panicky about some of these things. But if you look at history, we've always had a relationship with technology since we've been humans, but the technology has changed. Go back to the industrial revolutions and these big steam machines that were suddenly going to put everyone out of work. You've got people saying those type of things now, but the reality is that it's going to allow us, it's going to relieve workload from us as human beings. It's going to allow us to do more meaningful tasks. And if the technology is helping you 80, 90% of the way, and you're using your human instincts, and I would call it humanizing AI, to just tweak a little bit. So if it's helping you build a script, and then you just put your human aspect for the last 10, 20%, then that's great. And that's where, again, authenticity comes through.
Exactly. Well, I mean, that's just smart researching, isn't it? Essentially, it's harnessing it. I always kind of thought, people have been saying for years, the robots are going to take over. AI is going to take over. And I always
It's like
kind
the
of thought...
Terminator syndrome.
It really was, yeah. It was Skynet. And I've always thought, no, just unplug them. Well, what are they going to do then? Yeah. They've got no power. They're no good. I know that's a very simple way of looking at it. But it's about harnessing, is the point. It's about using it to our own ends.
Exactly. One of the products that's out there, and there's a lot of products out there, but there's a product out there called, from Microsoft, called Copilot. And I love the name because it's the co-pilot to you as the pilot. So you as the human being are still the pilot, and then you've got the technology to help you on the side.
It is, but I would counter that by saying sometimes co-pilot tends to do a little bit more piloting than I necessarily need. And I'm like, could you switch that off, please? But I get you. But it is a useful thing used in the right way.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's where the key is, I think, and you nailed it there. Used in the right way.
Yeah.
You can overuse it. You can completely rely on it. You can let it do your job for you. You can let it write emails for you. But then that's where it becomes very difficult. And you're seeing it a lot, especially around content, photos, videos, posts on social media. Who actually wrote this? Was this a human that wrote this? Was it AI that wrote this? And the danger is that we become a bit lazy. And that if we want to do a post on LinkedIn, as an example, or X or wherever, that we let AI create it for you and you just copy-paste post, copy-paste post, done. Yeah. And really what you should do is, give it some guidance, because it's as good as the prompting that you're giving it. Give you some output, tweak it as a human being, maybe push it through AI again a couple more times, again, tweak it as a human being, and then post it. And then I think you have a nice balance between something that's humanized, but the technology to help you with things like grammar and spelling. Yeah. And maybe the wording of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, let me give you an example of this. So I'm on holiday last summer, and I done a lot of podcasting in the last few years. A friend of mine said to me, "You got your podcast license. What about your company branding?" And I'm like, "Well, it's only me. I don't really need, it's just I just do it sometimes." And he said, "No, well, you should have a logo and everything." I'm like, "Well, okay. Well, who's going to design that? It's going to cost me a fortune." So he just picked up his phone, types it into ChatGPT, and AI has spat me out my logo,
Yeah.
which is great. But it was my name and a microphone.
Yeah.
It was really dull. It really
Yeah.
wasn't very thought
Not
out.
much soul in it.
There was zero soul in it at all, and I just kind of thought, well, if that's the best we can do here, but I recognise we're at an early stage here. So you're absolutely right. There's this collaboration, isn't there? And I think that's the way we have to look at
Absolutely.
it. That AI is going to do this, but we're still the masters.
Well, yeah, we are. There's an interesting story a few years back in the 90s where Garry Kasparov, the Russian chess master, was playing chess against Deep Blue? And at the time, the humans had always won the chess match, and the match was something like 2-2, and it was the deciding. And the media at the time was like, well, if the machine wins, it's the end of humanity. And actually, the story was that the machine did win. And Garry Kasparov at the time was quite upset by it, to say, look, no, they trained the machine and it was sort of unfair. But in retrospect, years later, it's like exactly what you said. Actually, it's a partnership. And the technology is actually there to make hopefully humanity better and not get in our way. But working together, we can make it, better together. And that's how we see it in our industry. It's not a replacement. It's really just to help us be more effective, more efficient than we currently are today. And as marketeers, exactly the same thing. If you were briefing an agency on a blog post, and then you pay, obviously, the agency some money, you wait a few days, you might get some output, and then you have to tweak it a few times. If you can do that today in AI, and if you can tweak it with your human brain afterwards, well, first of all, you can do that yourself without agency involvement. But then the question goes is, what about the agency that was doing that job before?
Yeah.
So I think companies need to also rethink their own business models as well on how do you embrace this? Because this is a technology that potentially could put certain people out of business. But we've been great at pivoting as human beings over the years, so that's what I would say.
Well, there's a positive aspect to it, I suppose, isn't there?
Yeah.
Ultimately, we've kind of pivoted to AI from branding as well. Let's get back to branding.
Yeah.
So if you're effective at communicating your brand, people relate to your brand.
Yes.
The values mean something. What you stand for, and I think that's we've got that far. That's really important. Branding is about visibility. It's about being noticed. But if you do it well, and I guess the simple approach is often the best approach here. It's the difference between being, a generic kind of service provider or something more unique, and that's where you want to be, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to be, you want to, you want to stick out, really.
Yeah.
Seth Godin, who's sort of like one of the marketing gurus in the US, has an interesting book called The Purple Cow, and it's quite a simple concept. You're driving down the road and you see a brown cow and a black cow and a brown cow and a black cow. And then suddenly you see a purple cow and you stop at the side of the road like, why is that cow purple? That cow is different. It's sticking out. It's unique in some way. And I've spoken to my own team about this is, in a very simple term, if you're doing an event and you want people to come to an event, there's lots of events in Dubai that customers can come to. So what's your purple cow? How are you going to stick out? How are you going to cut through the clutter as well? Because also we're being bombarded with messages every day. There was a study that was done a while back, and it might surprise you how many messages that we receive as human beings. And the study said that we can be bombarded with up to 5,000 messages per day. And we're like, wow, how is that even possible? But then I started thinking about it, and I thought, well, actually, if I'm going to the supermarket that day, think about all the brands, all the tins of tomatoes that are saying, buy me, buy me, buy me. So maybe it's not 5,000 in your world, but maybe it's a few hundred or so. So we've been bombarded. So cutting through the clutter as a marketeer is one of our key challenges
I bet it
in
is,
the
yeah.
industry today,
Yeah.
and being noticed, because the company I work for, there are other companies that do similar products. So how can we stand out? There are other podcasts out there are other radio stations out there are other TV channels out there. So how are people going to stand out? And it's really around differentiate. And there was a great business book maybe 30 years ago, Differentiate or Die, around how do you differentiate yourself. And maybe this starts creeping into personal branding. How do you differentiate yourself to the person that might look similar to you? They might act, dress similar to you. They might speak similar to you. So how do you differentiate yourself, against that? And that's also what the brands are trying to do as well, because, there's multiple cups of coffee that I can buy, but why do I always go to one particular brand for that particular cup of coffee? And that takes some interesting analysis, I think, as well.
I don't know how you zero in on that connection thing that we have to certain brands. I don't know where that comes from, because you used a word earlier on, a phrase, emotional connection that we have to brands, and I don't know how you encourage that, how you inculcate that. That the big successful brands, the two that you mentioned, the Coke and the Pepsi brands, have managed to do that pretty successfully.
Yeah, and it's something, like I said, we strive for all the time as marketeers, is this emotional connection. And as human beings, no one human being is the same as another. And people make different connections in different ways, and the brain operates, I guess, in different ways. But yeah, look, there are success stories out there on brands that have made those connections.
It reminds me of something, actually. You're bringing up loads of things that are forcing
It's
me
interesting
back to
topics,
my
yeah.
youth. Well, it is,
Yeah.
but one of those cola brands that you've mentioned, I have an emotional connection with, and it's just occurred to me. I went out with
Why? Yeah.
my mother took me in London when I must have been about, maybe I was 13, 14, something like that. Took me to the Cutty Sark, which is at
Yes.
Greenwich.
Yeah, I know. I've been there.
Towards southeast London, and we had a day out together. It was one of those days out where you're with your mum, and it was a great day. And she bought me one of those cola brands. Doesn't matter which one it is. And it was a really warm day, and it was an ice cold beverage. And I remember really enjoying it, and it really quenched my thirst. And I had a great day with my mum, so it was a really positive experience. But it's since then I've always bought that brand.
Yeah.
So it goes back that far.
Yeah, and absolutely. Like where I work, we get lots of interns, and I started in the company I work for as essentially as an intern. And I've always, throughout my career, I've always made time for the interns that have come. Because I've believed that, they are the leaders of the futures. And just like your story now, if they have a good experience and they have like an emotional connection with a great couple of people that work for Dell Technologies, then later on in life, when they might be a business leader and they might be having to make some decisions around their IT infrastructure, they might just think, you know what? I had that great experience when I was like 16, 17 at that company. And you know what? It's like it's unlocked, a memory trigger.
It's paying it forward, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So if you're well branded, you get to use that favoured sort of business word of the moment, aside from authentic, but you get to use that word resilient. I think that's the thing now. By extension, if you're well branded, you're more attractive in the landscape today, because it's a competitive landscape.
It is, absolutely. It is a very competitive landscape out there, even for organizations, but as people as well. And that's where your own brand is important. And we sometimes talk about CEOs, but something called a MEEO. MEEO.
Okay.
Just heard that one recently, actually, and I thought it was quite interesting. And it's really people taking control of their own brand and their visibility as a brand. You may work for a brand, but you are a brand as well. And you are an advocate for that brand. I am an advocate for the brand that I work for, but I am also an advocate for, I use the term I just used now, MEEO.
Okay, so how do you communicate? Well, if I was to say to you, let's go back 10 years, and I'm that guy where I say, oh, personal branding is just a load of old nonsense. The idiot that I probably was, perhaps still am in some ways. Let's look at that. How would you communicate your brand to me? What are you, I don't know, projecting? What are you presenting? Who is Ben McDonald?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, anyone that goes through a journey of, well, what is my brand, they have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And I often think about it as a looking in the mirror and a true reflection of yourself, like a real honest reflection, sobering. Like, who am I as a brand? Am I the person that, and I'm thinking from a work point of view, am I the person that always responds to emails late? Am I the person that always comes into the office early, always comes into the office late? Am I the person that at the company functions perhaps get out of hand a little bit sometimes, as well? So I think that you first start with a very true reflection of, who you are. So you assess, and then you start to figure out, okay, well, what do I want to be? What do I want to be known for? Maybe there's some things that you need to improve, like maybe you need to respond to your emails because that's part of your brand. But then you start thinking around, okay, well, you've got maybe your internal brand. You've got a brand, maybe even a personal brand, non-work brand. You've got your brand within the office, but you've got an external brand. Like today, I'm here representing myself, but also representing the company that I work for. So what I first started thinking about was, okay, well, I'm in two industries. I'm in marketing and I'm in IT. Okay, so what would be my voice, around that? What sort of platforms are available nowadays? Like 10, 15 years ago, if you wanted to create a blog or something, it was all very complicated. But now you can jump onto something like LinkedIn, which is, I guess, really the preferred business social media tool. Yeah. You can write articles, you can post, and I think you got to figure out, and I had to figure out, well, what am I going to talk about? So I tend to talk about, obviously, things to do with technology, but I also like to talk about pop culture, branding. A few posts I've done around, I like movies. I love Back to the Future. I love the Star Wars movies. Done some posts around that. I always try and keep it fun as well. I think a good rule to live by, especially around social media, is don't talk about yourself all the time. It's like going to a party. The most boring person is a person who's talking about themselves all the time. So I always try to keep a good balance between posting company information, but also posting interesting things from myself. So I started with a reflection of what are areas that I can maybe improve on, and think about topics that I know about that I can add some value to. And then I think one of the easy things to do, or two easy things to do on platforms like LinkedIn, is just click like. But something that takes a little bit more effort is actually to add commentary. Yeah. If someone adds a post, you say, okay, well, that's interesting, but in the UAE, XYZ, whatever. Yeah. Or my experience is 1, 2, 3. And that takes a little bit more effort, but also starts to build your own brand. So it's something that I've been doing consistently, and I decided to choose LinkedIn as my platform. And something that I've been quite fortunate to do is, one of my previous roles, I used to be a trainer. So I used to stand up in front of people and I used to train people on the products. Now I've carried that skill through the rest of my career. And fortunately, in the job I have today, I have great opportunities to do things like this. I have great opportunities to stand up on a stage and talk to customers and partners about marketing and the Dell Technologies brand. And that's something that probably would have been out of my comfort zone maybe 30 years ago. But sometimes you've got to just push yourself as well. So I think you've really got to decide what you want to do. You've got to be intentional about it. And it's not just a once-off thing. It's something you have to maintain.
So if you're thinking about your personal brand, for want of a better phrase, it's really about focus and zeroing in on what's important, isn't it? And there's kind of I don't know, it's almost a light bulb moment in some ways to me, that you think, no, this is actually who I am. This is who I need to present myself as, because this is my authentic self. Here we go, another tick
there we
on the
go.
piece of paper there. And it's about being consistently that person. People know what they're going to get, or maybe in the case of the US president, what they're not going to get. I mean, who knows? Because he's, I think, a very good example of a person with a very particular brand.
Yeah, one of my old bosses used to tell me quite an interesting story about. I don't even know if it was a real story, but he would drive past a car garage, and the advertising of the garage said, "We specialize in everything." Like, okay, well, how do you specialize in everything and all brands? So I think it's really deciding, well, okay, I can't talk about everything. I can't talk about HR. I can't talk about legal because that's not my thing.
Yeah.
But I can at least say, look, I'm in the marketing community. That's a subject that I have some knowledge on. Am I a personal branding expert? No, but I have an interest in it. And I think it's a fascinating topic to talk about as well. So I kind of try to stay in my lane, put it that way. And I think that's what people need to decide of. Well, what are the lanes that you want to stay in? And then you start building your voice and building a community, and people will want to hear from you as well and hear what you want to say.
Yeah. But the thing is, we've now got social media. We're running out of time, unfortunately, but I just wanted to make this point. We've now got social media, which is a key part of so many people's brands, and kind of a linchpin for a lot of people. If you put 100 people in a room, finding the person with the really authentic personal brand, the real standout character, is kind of hard, because for 50% of the room, it will just be the loudmouth, and the other 50% will be really interested. So it's a very divisive thing. And I think social media has kind of amplified that in lots of ways. So whether you're being helpful or insightful or solution-driven, whatever your thing is, I think you have to kind of tread carefully, don't you?
Yeah, I think generally you have to tread carefully, especially around social media. I think there's so many examples. We were talking earlier about brands, or you can pick many celebrities that are literally a hero today and a zero, tomorrow. And my dad used to be a carpenter, and there was a rule that he used to live by, which was measure twice, cut once. And I think a perfect rule in the digital age that we work in social media is also think twice, click once.
Right.
And sometimes, especially, you can get yourself into trouble very quickly around social media.
You can.
So you do have to tread carefully. The digital body language that you are creating can't be erased very easily. So something will come back and bite you, very likely. Yeah. So generally you have to, and more in the workplace now, HR are looking at not just your CV, but they're looking at, hey, let's check out your profile.
Oh, it's the first port of call.
See what
now,
you've been doing.
Yeah.
Even my kids now, they're looking me up on Google searches, and like, oh, there's a video of Dad there, and like, yeah, okay. And also some random baseball player in the US who happens to be called Ben McDonald as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I've got that with a golfer. Anyway, so look, last question for you, Ben. If somebody is listening to this now, thinking, I've got a small company, I need to be more effective when it comes to branding my company, maybe themselves as well.
Yes.
Is there a simple kind of checklist of the things that you should be doing?
Yeah. Well, I think I'll put it as simple as I can, ABC. So assess where you are today.
Right.
And this could be for your brand as a company, but also your personal brand. Really, where are you today? Speak to friends, speak to family, speak to work colleagues, and have that real true reflection around, who am I as a brand, me, CIO, but also what am I trying to achieve even in my company. So you really need to assess. The B is really around build. Whether it's your personal brand or whether it's your company brand, you need to be very definite about how are you going to build your brand, your company brand. What does it stand for? All the things we talked about earlier, authenticity, last time, trust, all of those sorts of things as well. And then once you've done the assessment and the building, you get to C, which is really got to care for it as well. Your brand, whether it be the company brand, is fragile. and it can be broken very, very quickly. So this is not just a once-off exercise. You have to come back every so often. And this is why you see brands so often tweaking their logos a little bit, tweaking their taglines, rebranding. And you see some of the best celebrities in the world. And think about, personal branding. The example I tend to use is David Beckham, actually.
Okay.
David Beckham is well known to people that are way younger than me, that don't even know that he played for Manchester United. And the fact that he's been able to create this brand Beckham and reinvent himself year after year or every few years, or another example I like to use for the older generation, maybe like us, is Madonna. Madonna has reinvented herself since 1984.
She's the queen of
every
that.
few years.
Yeah, for sure.
And she is still relevant today. Maybe not as relevant as in the late 80s, but she continues to build a new fan base, and that's what brands need to do. You can't just also continue selling or appealing to a certain group of customers. You've got to start bringing in new customers all the time.
It's a constant process
Exactly.
of evaluation, re-evaluation,
Exactly.
and kind of action, isn't it?
And that's why I like, everyone can relate to the celebrities, and everyone can think about, I love Tom Cruise as well. The guy's been around for years, and he's still relevant, and he's still, top drawer box office because they've reinvented themselves. They have different looks, different ways of doing things over the years, and that's how people can be successful. So look, we're not David Beckham, I'm not David Beckham, but I can be brand Ben. And maybe the final thought is also in the workplace. Often you are replacing someone that was before you. You don't want to be called the next Ben. Whoever takes on my job in the future, oh, you're the new Ben. No, I don't want to be the new Ben.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I want to be the first whoever. And often, I'll use a football analogy here. People say, this person's the new David Beckham, the new George Best, or whatever. The best footballers would say, well, actually, I'm not the new, I'm the first Ben. So that's what you really need to do.
It's a good place to end there, I think. So it is. Being your authentic self and an authentic conversation. I'm just getting 2 more authentics in. I've done 3. Ben McDonald is the marketing director at Dell Technologies. It's been interesting. John, I mean that. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for the time.
It's the Morning Drive. It's Mira Business FM. A like, a subscribe is always appreciated. Wherever you find us from, across social media and the online universe, get in touch. Tell us what you think. Everything we do, you can watch or listen to again, or both, and find us where you get your podcast from. Just search Mira Business FM.